thank you all for being here. It's nice to see you. My name is Marley Foster. This piece is called Flag Diary, What Protects. Some of you may have seen me out here on a ladder adding to it a few minutes ago. This has been a collaborative sort of social sculpture that I started working on in 2021 and have been able to host workshops to finish, or at least add to, this year. So we had a workshop this morning, and at the end of it, I had everyone come add their patches to the bottom row of this quilt. So that's what we were doing. So far, it has held up well outside. Fingers crossed that that continues. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am a sculptor sort of by training, which means that I just love objects and take objects very seriously. I really am interested in domestic objects and looking at things that you might find in your home or may have grown up with, like quilts. And I'm really interested in like interrogating those domestic objects and looking at them through the lens of somebody who grew up in the 2010s South, like in a middle-class Texas home. So I think that the spaces in which we live and the objects that we're surrounded by, even though they are inanimate, like really do influence how we move through the world and how we learn to participate in culture and society. So the longer I've been working with fabrics in my sculpture practice and using quilting as sort of a reference and a medium, the more I've started to dig into the history of quilting in my own family, but also in terms of the US economy and politics. So that's sort of where this was all born, and a little bit about my practice in general. So for this project, for the Flag Diary project, I want to pull from the complex history and visual language of quilting and use it as a tool to work through the relationship between family history and community politics. So this piece is all about public, private, personal, communal. It is both a personal diary that's something I kept to myself for a very long time, and something that is, I think now, acting as a flag that has more voices than just mine involved and is outside. So with that said, I do want to thank the people who have made this project possible. So Art League for allowing me to install this here, but also to host all of the workshops that we've had this year. Like, this project would not exist without other people being involved. So having the space to bring other people in has been really crucial and a lot of fun. I also want to thank the Idea Fund for the funding to make those workshops possible, because supplies cost money, and it's been really great to have supplies and be able to know that everything we need is going to be here. And I also want to thank everyone who's contributed. It's like all of you who are here today listening and taking part, here to see all of the work that's inside and right here, and everyone who's been part of the workshops. Like, you never know if people are going to show up to these things, and it's really nice when you do. So thank you for being here and taking the time. Okay, so can y'all still hear me okay over here, or do we need to move? Good. Okay, so a few quick references. I'm just going to give you three like quick things that I've been thinking about for the past 2 years while doing this project. So the first one is personal. When I think about quilts and about quilting, I think about my family. I think about both of my grandmothers. They both sew and taught me how to sew. I think a lot of people have a similar experience or a similar association. So when I'm making something like this, I think a lot about them and feel connected to them and to the sort of history of labor in my family. We can think of quilts as like family diaries. A lot of times they're made as gifts for births or weddings, and they sort of document family history in a way and often are passed down generationally. So there's this personal relationship with quilting that's very important to me. But the next thing, though, is that I've been thinking about community politics, and I've been thinking a lot about protest. So I started this project in 2021. I was teaching my first class back in person after the pandemic had sent everything virtual, and I was in this classroom teaching a quilting unit to a fibers class, thinking about, what is it that enables me to stand here in this classroom relatively safe and healthy and do this? Like, what are the things that protect me? And the longer I've thought about that question, the more complicated it has become, and the more complicated the answers have become, because some of the things that protect me don't protect other people. Some of the things that protect me may directly harm other people. Some of them seem innocuous, but aren't. So the answer gets weirder. The answer gets weirder and more surprising the longer you think about it. So I've been thinking a lot about, like, that time period is where this was born. And there were also lots of protests happening across the US with Black Lives Matter, which started in, like, really took off in 2020. And then a little more recently, like, protests in response to the repeal of Roe versus Wade. I was thinking about protests and thinking about, like, the visual language of a protest signs, like a piece of cardboard with, like, a real quick marker or painting with sort of a short, punchy phrase or slogan. I was thinking about that sort of visual language and that history in the United States. And I really wanted to put that together with quilting and see what was going to happen. And this is kind of where we wound up. So sort of combining this labor-intensive process of sewing with the quick, intuitive, just painted letters, and all of this sort of coming together pretty quickly at the end. So those are some quick references. As I mentioned earlier, all of this happened, most of this happened through workshops. So the assembled piece of the quilt top, is mine. That's what I worked on alone and sort of treated as a diary for probably like a year and a half. And all of the other patches have been added by community members in workshops. So in the workshops, we teach embroidery skills and hand sewing, and talk a little bit about quilting history, US history, and also talk about contemporary artists who are doing social projects and using some form or fashion of fiber art in their work. So it's been really exciting to see how these take place. The workshops really started as an idea. You can't really like sketch or predict what outcome you're gonna get. So it's been really exciting to see it take shape and then get to install here over this past week and see all of it together instead of like in separate bags in my house. Okay, so since this is a community project and this is participatory, I want to stop talking and I would like to ask all of you to just do like a quick little exercise with me. You may have seen inside there's a podium with postcards that look like this. My partner has a stack of them and she's going to hand them out. If you would like to sort of think about the question for yourself and write an answer on the postcard, there's a little like mailbox inside in the lobby that you can drop it into when you're done. So these can stay anonymous and no pressure if you're not feeling up to it today, but if you'd like to sort of participate and add your own answer to the project, I would love to have it and love to see them. And these postcards will get turned into something eventually. This is a newer element, but I think the more people who participate, the better. So we'll pass around markers and postcards. And yeah, thank you all for being here. I think while we're passing things around, I'm open to questions or comments.
Yeah, so if you have any questions for Marley, you'll raise your hand. We have a little microphone just so when we put this on YouTube, people can hear the questions too. So the floor is open if anyone wants to ask Marley. Yes.
Marley, is this an ongoing project? Do you see it as kind of open-ended? Would you ever consider doing it in other cities? How do you see this having a future life?
Yeah, great question. I meant to talk about that. Yeah, I see this as the first of a series. So I see this, like, I want to call this series Flag Diary. The question was, do I see this as an ongoing project and would it live other places? So yes, I want to continue working on this quilt. I see it continuing in two ways. So I would like to host workshops that are sort of more like quilting bees, where more of the actual quilting and assembling is happening instead of just working on individual patches. And I also would like to create similar pieces with different topics. So I've started one for myself all about fears. So I just have like a bag of patches of all of the things that I find very scary, which is pretty therapeutic actually. So I do see this ongoing and I would love for it to live in different iterations and then at different points along the way have it up and out for people to see. I also see it as ongoing, like, as it's installed outside. I am leaving it up the whole time. If I need to come and make repairs, I will, but it's going to stay outside for the duration of the show. And I want to do that because I sort of want this thing, this object, to like witness the life that's happening around it. Like, we are all living our lives and changing over time, and I want this to be affected and change over time, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully it doesn't get totally destroyed, but pretty much everything can be fixed, so it's kind of alive in that way too, I think.
Any other questions? I guess I have one. Since it's a community project and there's often been like 10 to 12, like 14 people, what are the discussions happening during the workshops itself?
Yeah, so they sort of fall into two different camps. We do have a lot of people helping each other learn the embroidery and practice the skills needed to do this. It's open to all experience levels. So I typically will have a few people who know nothing and a few people who know a lot more than me and have been doing this for decades. And that's really cool to see that intergenerational sharing and people helping each other and giving each other tips. Like, I've learned a lot from that as well. So those conversations are happening. And then we also do talk a lot. I will get art folks, it's no surprise. So sometimes people will talk about different artists or different projects that they feel like relate to this. We also talk a lot about people's experiences with quilts. I like to start every workshop with a conversation to get everybody warmed up and to start talking about what everybody thinks of when they think of a quilt, because people have different relationships to these objects. So that's sort of where it starts, and then we go from there, and it's a little different every time.
Cool. Anyone else? Oh, okay. All good.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much. And if you do want to add on to the quilt, we're actually having another workshop next month. We're ironing out details, but if you follow us on Instagram, we'll let y'all know when that's happening. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank y'all so much for being here. We can go back where it's warm, but you can either hand postcards to me or put them in the mailbox. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.